So we just wrapped up YCS Niagra, the first event of Rota format, so let's take a look at how things went down. Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video, and today we're going to be talking about YCS Niagra. But before I do want to start by a small little announcement for the channel. So when I first started making like super competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content, not just like Master Duel games or anything like that, but really just getting more in depth with the competitive scene of things, I made a lot of videos just complaining or just overall negative for the game itself. And looking back on that, now that I've grown as a player, but also kind of grown as a person, that's not a healthy way to, one, play the game, but also just to live. I do think that Konami and just Yu-Gi-Oh in general has its shortcomings, and that's fine to express those feelings, but a lot of those videos were not that. A lot of those videos were just overall complaining and just really unneeded complaining at that. It's a common meme in the Yu-Gi-Oh community that Yu-Gi-Oh players are never satisfied with anything, and I think what I was doing only further encourages that mentality amongst outside players. So going forward on the channel here, I'm only going to be doing my own thing. I'm going to just really be talking about the positives of Yu-Gi-Oh because Yu-Gi-Oh overall is my passion. It is something that I genuinely love playing. I've made some of my closest friends from Yu-Gi-Oh, whether it's from elementary school, middle school, high school, or even in my adulthood. But also on top of that, Yu-Gi-Oh somehow hits that sweet spot where I can not only have fun, but I can also bring out my competitive side, which I'm a very competitive person. And yes, not every format is going to appeal to me, but going forward, I'm going to start looking at the positive of things of any format, even if it's a dog shit format like the pure Snake Eye format was. It's not really healthy to continue to promote negativity in the Yu-Gi-Oh space. That being said, I do think that Konami needs to be called out on their mistakes because Lord knows they make mistakes, but if I do make a video like that, it's going to be more of a healthy, more constructive video where not only do I call out Konami on their mistakes, but I maybe bring up a topic on how they could have handled things better going forward. So videos like these ones that are popping on screen will no longer happen, which is crazy because one of those videos is my most viewed video on the channel and probably how most of you came across my channel. But like I said, I'm going to be going forward focusing more on the positive side of things of any format because I do think that every format has something that can be learned. Some formats promote technical play, some formats promote deck building, and just overall, I think there's always a positive side of things even when formats are at their worst. But enough of my rambling, let's jump into YCS Niagra. So as I said at the beginning of the video, YCS Niagra is the first YCS in Rota format. In fact, they both happened on the same weekend essentially. And honestly, despite the fact that the format hasn't really settled, it looks promising. We all figured that Snake Eye Azumina was going to be the most dominant deck in the room, and YCS Niagra, of course, proved that, but it wasn't by a huge margin. Like I said, there's still plenty of time for the format to settle, so I could be wrong today, but honestly, I do like where the format is kind of going. It was a very diverse top 32, and I do think that this is possibly a telling on how things can work. The format, of course, is heavily influenced by the Molcharming Fuaros. A lot of decks are being highlighted in this format simply because they can play under it or they just don't care about it. One of those decks, of course, is Pax Centurion deck. Centurion can play under Fuaros really easily. If you just shotgun the Fuaros, then they will just probably give you one draw by making like a synchro, and then they just put the rest in the back row. Another deck, of course, is going to be our second place Sky Striker player who, again, does not care about Fuaros. There's just a lot of decks that saw some play in this YCS that just don't care about Fuaros, so they can play around it. But it is a card that is heavily shaping the format going forward. Before we do break down the top 32, I real quick want to congratulate Landon Oliver for winning the YCS, but also Ryan Yu for taking pure Sky Striker Power Spell to second place. Bro got all the way to the finals with Sky Striker, and there was like very little new format cards in his deck, which we will get into the deck list here shortly. But again, congratulations to the both of them for getting the top two, and Landon for winning, and Ryan for taking Sky Striker of all things to second place. So for the top 32, 4 of them were like Fire King variants, which just could be Snake Eye Fire King or Azumina Fire King, Pure Fire King. So 4 of them were Fire King in some way, whereas 7 of them were Snake Eye, which again, It's really weird how they don't like mix them when doing the pie chart, because these two could mesh a lot. But there's a couple of things that really stand out to me. Obviously, Sky Striker making the top 32 and then eventually the runner-up is of course impressive, but Exodia made it to the top 32. The Millennium support actually for Rhoda was pretty good. The Blue Eyes card was really good, and Exodia can also play under Mulch Army pretty well. They only summon the big guy, which is like one draw, and then the big guy is like really hard to break through, especially with everything else. But they also, and we'll get into the deck list here in a minute, they ran Secret Village and Exodia as a spellcaster. So the Secret Village, and they have like terraforming, set rotation, there's a lot to be done there. So just the deck has a really strong endgame strategy, and I think going forward, this card may actually see a few more tops going forward. It's not going to be crazy by any means, but this deck can play under Mulch Army, which is a definitive factor on what's going to be like a better contending rogue deck going forward. So I think Exodia has a good chance of seeing more tops in the future. But we also see, of course, Rescue Ace making a return. Rescue Ace, the Rescue Ace Azamina, I believe, is what got played. We'll get into the deck list here shortly. Labyrinth has a very good strategy going into Mulch Army Fool Loss. So again, it's also seeing a top. And then Tempai, of course. Pack ended up making the top 16, and then unfortunately didn't make it to the top 8, but Pack went undefeated in Swiss, which was very impressive with Centurion, and of course he posted a deck list, so go check that out, but we will be talking about it in here. But he of course knows his deck, so he can talk about it more in depth in his own video. But Centurion, I think, is going to be very powerful going in this format, because again, it has a strategy under Fool Loss. Yubel ended up scrubbing out at the top 4, which is very telling of how this format's going to shape for Yubel. Yubel is probably going to get pushed out of the format slightly. It's still going to be a very good meta contender, but I think with Azamina having an Omnigate, the deck already kind of struggled going second, and it's going to struggle even more going second now because we have an Omnigate in a lot of different decks. Also, its end boards are really easy to break. We are seeing the uprising of board breakers like Evenly, Dark Ruler, Book of Eclipse. This deck is going to struggle again into that category. And then again, our winner is Fire King. It's actually Fire King Snake Eye Azamina, which let's go ahead and jump on over the deck list, because there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about with these deck lists. The first deck list we are going to talk about is the winner of the event, the Snake Eye Azamina Fire King, which, as we can see here, 2 Ulcanix. We were actually theorizing this is going to be a 1 of, but 2 of is crazy. The cool thing about Ulcanix is it fixes the biggest problem that Fire King had, which was bricking. The Fire Kings were always kind of a brick. If you saw too many of them in your opening hand, you saw the wrong ones in your opening hand. Ulcanix kind of fixes that, so it's really good to see. We are seeing the Dominus Impulse seeing play, and this card is going to be, spoiler alert, in almost every deck that we look at today. We are seeing the main decking of Droll and Lockbird. I don't believe we see this in like any of the other deck lists, even in the side deck. Droll and Lockbird is interesting because if you open Fool Loss or Droll and Lockbird, you are given the choice of either activating Fool Loss and drawing a bajillion, or stopping your opponent short. So it's really just hard to say like where you would make that choice. I guess it depends on the the matchup. And then we're seeing 2 Deception. This is, of course, no surprise. But we are also seeing Zombie Vampire. And I believe the reasoning that Landon gave was that the idea is this is for the mirror match. They summon this out with, like, the Fire King cards if they don't see, like, their Snake Eye board. And they go Zombie Vampire, mill off the top. And if their opponent mills, like, one of the Snake Eye monsters, they just summon it to their board. And that's Snake Eye combo from right there. So it's a really cool tech. I'm actually really I'm a big fan of this. And then of course we're seeing the Garunix Eternity because it is just a Raigeki. It's a board breaker. So seeing the return of this is really cool. We of course again have our Azamina monsters, Little Knight. We're seeing Doolittle Chimera make a comeback in this build. Overall, I really like the build. We of course see the Perulias in the side, whereas Fool Loss is in the main. This is going to be probably pretty common going forward. Perulia inside is still really good against the Yubel deck. If you activate Fool Loss and Perulia in the same turn against Yubel, they're really not playing. They're just passing, essentially, because otherwise they're going to give you a bajillion draws. We're seeing Skyburn in the side because, again, it is a board breaker. We're even seeing Dramatic Snake Eye Chase in the side deck. This is just really cool because it lets you recycle your Diabell Star, which, as you can see here, they are running the Betrayal Silvera in the side as well. So like the idea is you're running these like coinciding together. The Dramatic Chase is going to put that Diabell Star that you tributed in the Spell and Trap Zone, and then you can even banish it to special it from the Spell and Trap Zone. And then, of course, you set Silvera as a like pseudo Omni Negate, essentially. I'm a big fan of these cards. I'm curious to see how much play we continue to see these perform, because a talk that me and my buddy have always had with the Diabell Star and the Sinful Spoil cards is that Diabell Star is the only like consistent source to find them. There are other cards in the archetype that can find Sinful Spoils, like the some of the Whitewood monsters can find it, and then also the Rusialago, which is, you know, in his extra deck. But the issue is that 9 times out of 10 you're setting Deception. So it's really cool that he's putting Silvera in the side deck, probably for the sake of going first. He just sets it and then he has an Omni Negate there. And then we are seeing Retaliating Sea. This is really cool, and you're going to see this in a lot of the side decks in this video. Retaliating Sea is pretty much being used to chain to the Hallowed Azamina. You special it to your opponent's board, and then because Hallowed Azamina doesn't send for cost, it's going to be, you have to complete A to do B, essentially, because it has the then clause. It's going to reveal the Azamina, it's going to send the Sinful Spoils to the graveyard, and then special summon the Azamina if you successfully send the Sinful Spoils to the graveyard. The cool thing about Retaliating Sea is you chain it to Hallowed Azamina, special it to your opponent's board, and then they have to reveal and send still. They still have to resolve Hallowed Azamina as much as possible. So they're going to basically be sending their Deception to the banish pile, and then they don't get to summon out the Azamina monster. It's a very good counter, and something that a lot of the pros have probably been talking about, because as you can see, it's going to be in a lot of the lists. This is a really cool side deck card to have, but it also has its merit in some other matchups. So if you don't have this, I would consider picking it up. And then the last card I really want to talk about is the Fuko Bird. This is pretty much Snake Eye's like counter to Tenpai. Tenpai has like no way around this card. If they just hit you with like Fool Loss, you can just summon out the Fuko Bird, and then that gives them one draw, sure, but they really don't have an answer for this. You just summon this out, and they can't get over it. They can't get past it. They can't remove it unless they have a Kaiju, which, spoiler alert, they don't run Kaijus. It's really hard for them to break this bird, and they basically, if you summon this bird, it buys you a turn, and then at that point your opponent is, you know, going to have to figure out how to not die when the turn gets back to you. All right, we're gonna look at Ryan Yu's list now, and it's just Sky Striker. It's 35 spells with 1 Imperm, 3 Ray, and a Rose. Like, it's pretty much what you would expect. It's obviously Go Second Turbo, and it's all Sky Striker for the most part. And kudos to Ryan for making it as far as he did with this deck. And again, there's the only new card in this set is Dominus Impulse, and it's in his side deck. He has 3 Ash, of course, but he's running 3 Thrust. So obviously he's going to be running the Thrust targets. He's going to be running Threatening Roar, DD Ground. He's going to be running D Barrier. He has all the tools he needs to counter almost every deck in the current format. So honestly, again, kudos to Ryan for making it as far as he did. This is a really cool list, but I think it does definitely take a skilled player like Ryan to make it as far as he did with this list. But this was also the perfect YCS to do something like this, because the format is still fresh. People are still figuring things out. Running in with a deck like this, just catching everyone off guard, is perfect. Next is the top 4 Tenpai list, the deck that made it to top 4 with Tenpai, and this is pretty much what you'd expect. They are running 2 of the Genroku instead of 1. It's kind of a preference on how many you run of that. They're running 2 of Doradora instead of 1. Again, preference. They are running 2 Fuelos and 1 Perulia. I'm curious to find out if this was a choice or if they just only own 2 copies of Fuelos, so they threw in a Perulia to kind of make up for it. I am interested on that. 2 Lightning Storm because it's, you know, mandatory to only run 2, Raigeki, and then 2 Droplet. They're running 2 of these because the math kind of still adds up to a 40 card deck. Is like the odds of seeing this card if you're running 2 or 3 is so minute that there's no super good reason to run the 3rd if you need the deck size. And then, again, Dominus Impulse. This card is crazy. There is, like, if you can run this card, there's no reason not to. This card is insane. And then in the side, it's pretty, you know, standard for the Tenpai deck. We have obviously Solemn. We have like going first strategies if they have to go first. Heat Wave, Cosmic for like Runic Stun because they do have to respect that. The Quakimaru, but the one we are going to talk about is the Nutbuster Dragon or Grand Tusk. This is a summon target off of seals. If they don't need Quakimaru or like Quakimaru is not the good option, then Grand Tusk is really good because it's like when this card's summoned, target 2 cards on the field, destroy them, and then it gains 600 attack for each card destroyed. This card's pretty crazy. It basically just lets you further play and just have like more interaction on your opponent's turn than just Quakimaru Floodgate or summon out a Tenpai if you don't need to. I like this. This is a really cool tech. And I could see this card slightly going up like a penny stock. It's only 4 cents of a card. It came out in Poe as a super rare, and then it came out as a common in one of the megatins. So obviously this card's not gonna be crazy, but I could see penny stocks on this card for sure. The other top 4 contender is going to be the Labyrinth player. Pretty Labyrinth standard. Like the cool thing about this is it's Furniture Lab. It is not just like a bajillion traps lab like Joshua Schmidt plays. This is a Furniture Lab build with extravagance and no prosperity anymore, which fair enough. Once again, Dominus Impulse. We have Transaction Rollback. We have the Daru mechanic because this card's still cracked in this current format. Book of Moon is just a strong effect, essentially. Yeah, I mean, I like this build. It plays really well into Fualos, which they are also playing. They just play Fualos, and this deck doesn't special from the extra deck really ever, and it does, of course, special from main deck, the Big Welcome or the Welcome special from main deck. So it does happen from time to time, but the cool thing about Big Welcome is like you summon out the big lady, the lovely lady, and then like you bounce one back, and then you just pop one out their hand. So the card they drew could have been the card that gets popped. So I don't know. It's a really cool build. I like it, and they are still running the Perulia in the side. This is gonna be something you see commonly in this format: is Fualos and Impulse in the main, and then Perulia in the side. This is just going to be like the new kind of format we are in. And then we're going to move on to Pack's build, Bestial Centurion. Pack, I don't think realizes this, but Bestial Lubellion went up to like $20 over the weekend because of this. I don't know much about Centurion myself. I don't fully know how the deck runs, but the deck is strong. They make Chaos Angel really easily. They can make Dispatter, which is a negate. They have time for Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, but it's also technically a board breaker. Once again, the Retaliating Sea makes a comeback. Deck Lockdown's really cool. He's running the Tikaboo. Running Bonfire, because Bonfire can actually search, like, I think 2 of the Centurion monsters. And wouldn't you know it, we have Perulia and Fualos on the side. The cool thing about Centurion is they have a really good, like, going first strategy, and they have no way to get that Fualos out of their hand. So it's really good idea from Pack's end to be running this in the side, because there's not, like, a lot of good ways to get rid of this going first, and then he has plenty of going second strategies. As you see, Ghost Ogre is making a comeback because it hurts Deception, and it hurts plenty of other like strategies that have continuous spells. Voiceless Voice is kind of making a comeback, so this hurts it as well. We have the Veiler, the Imperm. He doesn't have Impulse, which actually is interesting, but at the same time, Impulse hurts light monsters, and once you know it, he's playing light monsters, so makes sense. The list I was really looking forward to looking to here is Exodia from Oliver. As you see, the 3 Blue Eyes monsters made it into the deck. He is playing Secret Village with set rotation and terraforming. And again, the Exodia is a spellcaster, so they summon out this big beefy motherfucker that has a negate, and they have Secret Village. It's a really hard card to, it's a really hard board to crack. And on top of that, it's a shifter deck. Like this, he probably stole some wins straight from shifter. And I'm not trying to diminish his value as a player. I'm sure he is a very good player, but let's be honest, shifter does steal games. So I'm sure he's won a handful of his games from shifter. And then even then, if depending on his opponent, it came down to skill, and he prevailed. He made top 32 with Exodia, and that's all that really matters. Like he did spectacular with this deck. Going forward, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I think Exodia is an interesting rogue strategy because it plays well under the Fualos. As you see, he doesn't have Fualos in here. He doesn't have Perulia because he doesn't need it. Although, let's be honest, if he activated Fualos on going second and his opponent didn't know he was playing Exodia and he drew all 5 pieces, that would be fucking sick. Honestly, I kind of promote it. But nevertheless, congratulations to Oliver for top 32 with Exodia. Keep up the good work, and I hope we see more Exodia in future events here in the current format. The last deck I want to talk about is Rescue Ace. Cool thing about Rescue Ace is that it does also play pretty well under Food Loss. They activate Food Loss, and then you just try to get to Turbulence. You might give them like 1 or 2 draws in the process, but then you set 5 pass is still set 4 pass is still a very good strategy in the format. They're, again, running the Dominus Impulse. They're running the Simple Swell package with Azamina. They have Food Loss on the side. They even have Phantasme on the side. They are going to be drawing a lot of cards if they're going second. Ghost Sister for time. They have Thrust for the other targets. This deck, and then a Super Poly for board breakers, because Super Poly, I think if you can fit it and you have room in your extra deck, then play it. I think it's going to be really good cracking Azamina boards. Like Super Poly into a board where they have an Azamina card and a Desiree just instantly cracks it, makes a Draco Stapelia. Now, a big thing I want to talk about with this format is we are seeing the departure of Fiendsmith to an extent. Obviously, top 8, we still see Fiendsmith in Yubel, which they were also running a Millennium package, which is pretty cool. We are still seeing Fiendsmith, Snake Eye, Azamina. We're seeing a lot of Fiendsmith still, so it's not gone. But what a lot of Snake Eye players are doing is they want to run Dominus Impulse, and that cuts you off of light effects. So they are either cutting down their Fiendsmith package significantly, or they're cutting it entirely. And I do think with the fact that, at least with Snake Eye, I think Fire King is going to be the better version now, simply because they can run Dominus Impulse if they play the Fire King engine. Fire King is a lot less bricky now, and it plays a lot better under Fool Loss. If your opponent activates Fool Loss, for the most part, you don't really care. Fire King is special from hand and graveyard for the most part. There's not really any specialing from deck. So the Fire King monsters, they build a significant board on their own without the extra deck, and they play under Fool Loss. And on top of that, they can still play Dominus Impulse. I do think that the Fire King variant of Snake Eye going forward will be the best version of the deck, just because they can play Dominus Impulse and Fool Loss doesn't affect them as much. But I do want to thank you all for watching this video. That's all I have for you for YCS Niagra. Please don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already and you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content, so I can continue to make videos like this one. I want to thank you all for the mass amount of support the channel has been seeing for a while. We are at 1895 subscribers as of recording this video, and we are about to break 1900. When we do break 1900, I do want to do a bit of a Q&A. I do think that, like, a lot of my viewers just don't really know me as a player. Obviously, I'm not going to reveal my personal life, but if you want any sort of, if there's a question you have about me as a player or just like my hobbies in Yu-Gi-Oh, feel free to ask in the community tab. I don't have a Twitter, so please be sure to do that. I do want to do a Q&A. I do want to like kind of be more personal in a sense with my community, but I thank you all again for the massive amount of support. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.